This has been a disastrous season for the Indiana Fever. Also, particularly for Caitlin Clark, who has struggled with injuries over the course of this season. It hasn't been the type of sophomore season that we all have hoped for as the fans, for as the Indiana Fever. But at the end of the game, it appears that Caitlin Clark fried her groin again. And when I say fried, I mean it's like cooked her groin again. Like she made a pass to Kelsey Mitchell on a backdoor cut and she's holding her groin, and then she immediately goes and puts her head to the other side of the basketball court. And I hope this is not the case because the league is better with Caitlin Clark, and the Fever without Caitlin Clark have showed that they are capable of winning, are capable of playing in big games, and capable of surviving without her. But they're a much better team while she's on the basketball court. And we know Caitlin Clark has been struggling, trying to get in rhythm, trying to get in stride, trying to get in her groove back since she's returned from the injury. And it looks like, and I'm no doctor, but the pain that we saw on Caitlin Clark's face looked like she probably had re-injured her groin. And it's going to be so unfortunate because the Indiana Fever, they play with New York Liberty tomorrow. And then we got the All-Star weekend coming up this weekend. Based on her reaction, based on what I saw, based on like how she was in immense pain, it wouldn't shock me if reports are later going to come out, whether tomorrow, that she is possibly re-injured her groin and she's probably going to miss tomorrow's game. And who knows what's going to happen with the Indiana game being the Indiana All-Star game being in Indiana this week. So it's very, very, very unfortunate if that's the case. And I hope and pray it's not the case. But just off the look on her face, it looks like she probably fears the worst. But hopefully she gets an MRI and hopefully she's fine. But the Indiana Fever, they play the Connecticut Sun. And the Connecticut Sun always plays hard against the Indiana Fever. Seems like the Connecticut Sun is kind of the Indiana Fever's kryptonite when it comes to being on the basketball court, just like they've always struggled against the Connecticut Sun, no matter the last year's team with Alyssa Thomas and Wanda Bonner, Brianna Jones and the crew, or this team with Maria Marbury and Sonia Rivers and the legend Tina Charles, who is the second all-time leader scorer in WNBA history, who played extremely well this past game. But it just seems like when the Indiana Fever, they play aggressive physical teams, they tend to struggle a little bit more. Teams that are going to be physical, that are going to push up on them, that are going to be aggressive with them and try to get foul calls, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And we've seen some of the foul calls that weren't necessarily being called for the Indiana Fever, especially in particular with the Tina Charles situation where she swiped down on Leah Boston and it was no foul called. And that's some of the things that the referee has to be better. We saw Caitlin Clark very agitated throughout this entire game, very emotional. And for us, like her on-court body language, we know everybody talks about it. It needs to improve. But at the same time, when your team is not getting the benefit of doubt or a team is allowed to be more physical with you in comparison, then that's going to frustrate not just Caitlin Clark, but the coach, Stephanie White, and Aaliyah Boston, and all the players on the Indiana Fever. So you look at this game, it was a grind-out game, and the Connecticut Sun, they played very hard, but the Indiana Fever were able to come out victorious. Kelsey Mitchell had another great game, 20 points. Aaliyah Boston found her rhythm in the second half, even though she was a no-show in the first half. Even Caitlin Clark, she had 9 straight points in that fourth quarter. And she was starting to kind of figure out, if I can't get my three-point shot, I was 1 for 7 for the three-point line, I still can be able to be a factor and attack the rim and get to the second level of the basketball court. That's something that Caitlin Clark is going to have to figure out. But most importantly, we're hoping that Caitlin Clark isn't hurt, because if she's hurt, it's going to be a tremendous loss for the WNBA, for a sense of I was going to come on here and talk about the ESPN rankings. I was going to come talk about, give you a recap of the Indiana Fever versus Connecticut Sun. I did a little bit of that portion, but it was going to be a little bit more critiquing than concerning. But now, since we just saw Caitlin Clark possibly re-injure her groin, it's hard for me to get on here and really critique everything that I'm seeing with Caitlin Clark returning from her injury, because the truth of the matter is Caitlin Clark is not 100%. And she's suffered 2 injuries this year. And it seems like she retweaked her groin. And that just goes to show you that it's hard to judge Caitlin Clark's game solely off the fact that she hasn't been healthy for this entire 2025 season. And sometimes that just happens. We have expectations, and sometimes players aren't allowed to meet those expectations, having nothing to do with their game or their ability. But Caitlin Clark has missed 9 games this year, and the Indiana Fever are 4-5 in those games. And with how frustrated she appeared, how she was damn near in tears on the sideline, put the towel on her head immediately, it looks like that she knows that she's re-injured her groin. So, and if that's the case, we're talking possibly, because I'm not a doctor, but possibly Caitlin Clark is going to miss the New York Liberty game, which is going to be a big game in New York. And then All-Star Weekend is this weekend, and it's in Indiana. They're hosting. Caitlin Clark is the face of the WNBA, and she's going to participate, or supposedly participate, in the three-point contest, which we all know she's been waiting to do, because she wanted to make sure that the first time she participated in the three-point contest was for the WNBA and not for the NBA, like we saw with Sabrina Escu versus Stephen Curry in that great event in 2023. And it's hard to judge, because when we talk about Caitlin Clark, this year she hasn't been healthy. She's missed 9 games, like I mentioned. But for her game and for her play style is so unique. She's a generator. She creates her passing ability. But at the same time, early in the season, I said that it wouldn't shock me if Caitlin Clark had a Steve Nash MVP caliber season, when we're talking about 16 to 10 to 12 assists per game. If you look at her numbers right now, she's averaging 16 points and 9 assists. So far, that's been a down year with all the injuries that she has suffered. And also her shooting has been not the shooting we've grown accustomed to seeing. She's right now shooting 2 for 35 on the road for this entire season. Now, she has missed 9 games in totality. So, of course, that stat is going to look very, very crazy. But at the same time, she hasn't been 100% healthy. But also her field goal percentage is down from last year. Her I think it's like 37%. She's shooting like 29% for the three-point line, as well as 80% from the free throw line, which was 90% the following year. Now, her overall field goal percentage is down across the board. Her points are down. Only thing that's been up is her assists, but also her turnovers are up, which she's averaging 5.6 turnovers per game as well. So this has been a down year for Caitlin Clark. But at the same time, she has missed 9 games. She has played with injuries, and she hasn't been fully healthy. And even right now, she possibly tweaked her groin again. So how do we judge and look at, in correlation, all the events that have happened to Caitlin Clark this season, and when we're judging where she stands within the WNBA right now for us, where she rated at? So that's why when ESPN came out with their ratings, people were saying, well, Caitlin Clark's rated number 9, and I think Aaliyah Boston was rated ahead of her. And I really had no problem with where Caitlin Clark was rated, because it wasn't really talking about overall. We're talking about the best so far this 2025 season. When we're talking about overall, when we talk about overall game, what you bring to the basketball court, your impact, the eye test, Caitlin Clark is much higher on that list. But when we're talking about right now, Caitlin Clark isn't a top 10 basketball player in the WNBA right now for this 2025 NBA season. Now, largely that has to do with her injuries, and she just got hurt, most likely again, but also it has to do with her shooting is down across the board. And when you combine those two things, when you're a shooter and you need your lift and you need you need rhythm and you're jumping, that affects your overall shooting ability. Anybody that has played the game of basketball will tell you that your legs are the most important thing to have as a shooter. If you're struggling with a hamstring injury and struggling with a groin injury, then it doesn't really surprise me that her shooting percentages are very, very low. And she hasn't played this entire season. It's been half and half on, half off. It's not really a shocker. She's missed 9 games, and potentially she can miss even more games if this injury, hopefully knock on wood, isn't something serious. But the way her reaction was, it wouldn't shock me that if Caitlin Clark is going to miss some more games. So, like I said, I was going to come on here and talk about and break down the ratings and break down everything that's been going on for us at ESPN coming out with the ratings. But at this point, it really doesn't make sense for me, chat, to really do that, because what I was going to talk about it's like Caitlin Clark's averaging 25 minutes since she's returned from injury. She's not even playing the usual 30 to 32 minutes per game that she is accustomed to playing, and then she got hurt. So it's just like breaking things down when we talk about her game and things that she needs to improve on. Yes, I can do that. But at the same time, knowing that she's missed 9 games, she's been hurt, and she just possibly she did re-injure herself again. It's like the best thing I can do was what I mentioned in the previous stream is, yes, she's not a top 10 basketball player in the WNBA this season so far. When we're talking about this year, overall, that's a different story. Yes, injuries have played a part in her struggling this season with her shooting, with her three-point percentage, field goal percentage, free throw percentage, all that is down in comparison to her rookie season. But also, Caitlin Clark is also struggling because her game still needs to develop. And when teams are allowed to be more physical and more aggressive, and they're blitzing, they're face guarding, they're pulling, that's something that she's going to have to figure out. And that's something that she did in the offseason when she was in the gym and she gained more muscle and she gained more strength. But at the same time, you have to get in a rhythm. You have to be able to utilize some of the things that you worked on in the offseason and implement that on the court. And so far, for as a basketball standpoint, some of the things on the basketball court that we're seeing from Caitlin Clark is some of the things that we were seeing back in college and even back in her rookie season that she still needs to work on. But that's the beauty of it. Like, she is sorry, fella. she is going to improve. And I can come out and, like I said earlier before the season even started, I said that she's going to have it wouldn't shock me if her season will go one or two ways, possibly. And I can pull up the old streams. I said that possibly she's probably going to average the same amount of points, or she can take a leap where we're talking about 22 points per game, 8-9 assists, 22 to 23 points per game. Because I still believe that eventually everything's going to click for Caitlin Clark for her scoring to her passing like we've seen it in college. But I also said that her team could be so good this year that she can play the Steve Nash role where she doesn't have to score the ball because she has more players that are able to help her and help the Indiana Fever become a title contender, which means it's going to be less shots, but her assists are going to be up, but her scoring is going to be down. It's a combination of two because Caitlin Clark has been hurt. She does have better players in Natasha Howard, Sophia Cunningham, even though DeWanda Bauer got released and she's with the Mercury right now, but her team is better this year, so she doesn't have solely the same type of responsibility that she had last year, but at the same time, averaging Steve Nash type of MVP numbers, which is great. But it's only great when your team is a top 4 seed in the WNBA and when your field goal percentage is also decent. It doesn't look good when it's the opposite, if that makes sense. And that's what we're seeing right now with Caitlin Clark. Even though it's been injuries, she's missed 9 games, and she just probably suffered another injury and retweaked her groin injury, which possibly could lead her out. I'm just assuming the Liberty game at least, hopefully not for the All-Star weekend in Indiana this upcoming weekend. So, but who knows? We're going to see. And Franklin said, I saw so I fell in. And that's some of the things that Indiana Fever fans have been saying that it's been going on with the Fever, that they're not getting calls, that they're not being respected. But sometimes when if you're the Indiana Fever fan, sometimes you may want your players to be the more physical team. Right now in the WNBA, teams know that they can be more physical and get away with it, and also that they can be more aggressive and they can do things because the Indiana Fever aren't necessarily going to fight back. That's why I love when Aaliyah Boston is chirping. That's why I love when Sophia Cunningham is standing up for her teammates. That's why I love when it's just like the Indiana Fever, as a team-wise, they get tired of absorbing all the hatred, all the shit talking, all the physical aggressiveness, whether it's fouling or jersey pulling and stuff like that. Sometimes they need to afflict some of that on the opposing team first, so they can put it in the atmosphere in the game. Like, okay, we're going to be physical. Everybody's going to be physical. That's sometimes I feel like the Indiana Fever don't do that. And that's why when people talk about an enforcer, they need somebody that's going to be an enforcer that way and just not be an enforcer when it comes to reacting. Sometimes you got to be proactive instead of reacting on the basketball court for the physicality. Sometimes you got to be the aggressor, being physical, pulling jerseys. So even if the refs are noticing and calling fouls early on, they're letting you're kind of dictating what the game is going to be like. But it's your boy, Mike K. Smith. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Follow your boy on AKISS NBA and all the social media platforms. Always remember, faith without works is dead. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your understanding, and always acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. I'm gone, man. Peace.